Hi, I'm Nico. Welcome back to the channel. The holiday season is here, and it's time now to make a holiday greeting card. Traditionally, I like to make a still life photograph to use as a greeting card. So today, let's make one, and I'll try to share some tips on how to make still life photographs and how to take your still life game to the next level. Disclaimer, I am not a big still lifes guy. It was always my least favorite part of photography back in school. It has grown on me a little bit over the years, but I would still never ever call myself a still life photographer, and I have a lot of respect for the people who have the kind of patience and attention to detail that it takes to be top still life photographers. Anyway, let's do this. So 2020 hasn't been a fun year, and I was already thinking that before I learned of Diego Maradona's passing away. So the idea I went with is having this guy carrying a dead or dying flower. So that's my basic idea, and then to create a world or a stage around him that's cold and dark and hostile as winter can sometimes be. So with that basic idea in mind, it's time to go gather our supplies. I already had the figurine at home, but I had to rush into town on a beautiful and cold day of November to buy some flowers and some supplies to build my stage. I hit the flower shops first. The couple first I went to were too expensive, so I decided to go to the market square where the cheapest flowers can be found. If you're on a budget, you can very much find vegetation for free, even if you live in a big city. It's everywhere if you look for it. At the flower shop, I made a bit of a discovery. I found a tiny pumpkin. I didn't know they could grow so tiny, and I thought this would maybe make a better idea than the flower, which is a bit melodramatic. So keep your mind open, and whatever you find can influence you. And don't get married to your idea too early. Next up, I went to the art supply store to buy kind of basic furniture, and I saw that they were stocking fake snow, which is super helpful for a project such as this one. So I sprung the big bucks and bought a bag of artificial snow. The last stop I made was to the local liquor store to get some cardboard. Cardboard is the backbone of a still life DIY project. You need it. So I grabbed a couple of boxes and headed home. The second step in the project is to make what I call a proof of concept or a basic setup. It's where I assemble my accessories to make sure that my idea is actually doable and that it's not gonna look ridiculous or I'm not missing a key element. At this stage, I assemble roughly my components and I snap a first picture just to see that it's possible and that the scene is gonna work and it's not missing anything important. This is an okay picture for the 2 minutes that it took me to assemble the scene, but obviously the big problem with that picture is the light. It's all coming from the same ceiling light and thus hitting the whole scene from the same distance, so I get like the same light everywhere in the frame, and that's not what you want. To bring complexity and scale to a scene, you want light to hit different parts of the scene differently to suggest the size of a real landscape. So most of the time I think you would start with a key, but in this scene something was really important for me. It was to have a gloomy last sun of the day light coming from behind the mountains. So I set that light first because everything else depends on this one, I think, in this scene. So I used a simple Nikon SB800 speed light with a grid aimed at my gray background, and that would just give me like the afterglow of a very, very late sunset in winter. Now we can use that to deduce the rest of the light. If the sun was already set behind the mountains, what would be lighting our scene? Perhaps a big cloud over the whole scene that would still be getting some sunlight and reflect it onto the scene. So I decided to use a softbox. It's 60 by 60 centimeters, but compared to the size of our character and the scene, it's gigantic. It is the size of a cloud. So I'm setting it up 90 degrees over my scene. You can see that I feathered it a bit forward, and it's not exactly over the head of my character. It's for two reasons. One, I want to feather it away from the mountains because I want those mountains to be black so that the sunset behind them will be more contrasty. Also, if I later decide to sprinkle some snow in front of the lens, I need some of the light from the softbox to illuminate the snow. There's a third light in this picture. It's the light that's coming from the window, and that's giving me a bit of a rim. That could be the moonlight reflecting the sun, which is behind the horizon. Now let's take a shot with our lights on, and this looks pretty good. Definitely looks much better to me than the uniform light we were getting earlier with just the light bulb. So now it's time for the final step, which is fine-tuning my scene and setting up the final scene. Like, this is when you have to really engage with your scene and make sure that every detail is perfect. You have your lights down, you have your camera settings, you've made your measures, so you don't need to worry about that anymore. What you need to worry about is that everything in the scene is perfect. So you can see that my story has changed. The character is no longer carrying a flower, but he was carrying a pumpkin to Halloween dinner with his grandma, and he dropped it like a fool. So now I've put snow everywhere. You see that I have drawn the footsteps of a character to suggest that he's been walking through this desolated area. Like I was saying, attention to details. I've made sure that the snow really covers the middle of our scene, so you don't see the connection between the two sheets of paper. And now I've decided that the pumpkin would look better if it was a bit shattered on impact. So once I got the photo with an intact pumpkin, just to be safe, I took the pumpkin to the kitchen and shattered it. This works really well, so this is, we're 90% of the way there. Now the last thing I want to do is try to sprinkle some snow in front of the lens to simulate snowfall and really drive home the point that it is a cold, cold winter night. Anyway, this is our final picture. I'm happy with it. It took about 2 hours to shoot and about an hour and a half to go to town and collect the supplies. So it's just an afternoon's worth of work, and I think it's great to just practice your creativity and give yourself little challenges such as this one. From both me and my buddy here, we wish you good holidays, and we'll talk to you sometime about something else. Cheers!